Hello and welcome everyone to our second webinar of the week. Yesterday we did a product update, our 2022.3 release. Today we have a webinar on our Smart Doc editor. We wanted to go a little bit more in detail about that. There's a lot of new features added, which will be a little bit demoed today by, of course, Sean.
Hey, Victor.
Hey, hello. What do you have for us today?
Yeah, well, just real quick, as you said, it's a two-part webinar series around the Q1 launch of this year. So for those of you who, for some reason, didn't go to yesterday's webinar, that is recorded and already posted on our YouTube channel. We can, maybe one of the panelists can share the link to that recording while we're going through the presentation here. And today's webinar will also be recorded too. So if you see anything that you want to go back and rewatch or pause or something, you'll have the ability for that as well. I'm going to give a product update on the Smart Document Editor component and library. And I want to clarify for our audience, because we have different levels of experience. Some people are just evaluating Servoy. Some people are experts. They're already using this particular components in their applications. We did do an update webinar, I think the Q2 or Q3 webinar of last year, which really went in more detail about this component. So I recommend if you're sort of coming new to this, that you can fill in the gaps there by watching that webinar or visit the project page, which I'll share as well. Because really what we're going to go through is kind of an overview of the component, but really get right into what's new. So it will be kind of skipping ahead a bit. I think that's nice because we have some exciting stuff to show. This webinar will be pretty much all demo. I'm just going to give a quick preamble with a few slides, and then we'll get right into demoing what's new, and we'll take questions. We'll get out of here. We should be, I think, pretty short compared to yesterday.
All right, sounds really good.
Let everyone get on with their weekend.
If anyone has any questions, please put them in the Q&A. Questions that you put in the chat will not be answered. Of course, you can show your enthusiasm there. Everyone else can see it, but the questions will have to go through Q&A, and then I can interrupt Sean and pass on those questions. One more question from me. This webinar, the previous webinar that you spoke about, can that be found on the YouTube channel as well?
Yes, it can. So if one of our panelists could, who's monitoring this, can go ahead and paste that in to the chat for everyone, so they can go back and rewatch it.
All right.
Or watch it new if they need to.
All right. So please, everyone, a lot of questions for Sean. Make them very difficult, and then I think you can take it away.
All right. Thanks, Victor. Okay. Real quick before we get into the demo. I would be remiss and bugged by our marketing department if I missed this, because we are putting together our annual user conference. Typically, we would do this in one city. It's historically been in Amsterdam. But this year, we are finally able to get back together, although we're doing something different. We're bringing it on tour to a few cities. Amsterdam is that location is filling up really quickly, because we consolidated the German one from Frankfurt as well into Amsterdam. So that has a lot of attendees. We still have some space in New York and Santa Monica. And this is a great opportunity to meet the CEO, the product manager, the director of R&D, and I think more importantly, other customers who have similar situations as you. Our panelists will paste in information about this, and if you haven't heard about this already, this is a great opportunity to to dive in deeper with Servoy. So I'll leave it there and let our panelists put some more info. You guys can ask questions about it as well. All right, moving on from that, let's talk about the Smart Document Editor component. Real quick overview, just because there could be people that have no idea what this is going to be about. So I want to give a background. This is basically a in-app text editing component for editing documents, and you can put it directly into business applications. It's ideal for document generation, ad hoc reports where end users can sort of customize their own documents and save them because they can be merged later with data and emailed or moved around. It really is up to you. It really is a feature complete editor. In fact, we take an off-the-shelf product and OEM it. To be honest with you, that way we can get the best tools to our users, our customers, but we make it easy to drag and drop on a screen, embedded in your application, mix it with all your data. There's an event model, so you can trap all the events, and there's some powerful features for merging in there as well. So I'm not going to show all the features in this webinar because that was done already. I'm going to show what's new, and for that, it's really 3 features. The first one is brand new, and it's called if blocks. And essentially, this is a tag you can insert into a document, like an open and close tag. And in between that is the block. And essentially, you get to evaluate while the document is processing, like if you're merging tags, while it's processing, you get to evaluate if the content that's within that block should be shown or not. So that's ideal for static content, and maybe you want to do it because of security or some preferences you have on the tenant in a multi-tenant setup or a user, or maybe just some configurations where you can turn it on and off. But it's really handy to do, and I'll show that's brand new. So I'll show how that works. Now we have already something called mention tags, but what we've added here is a callback. And in fact, all these features will work on a callback approach. And essentially what that does, so the way this was working before is you generate your tag library so that your tags are available in the document. They come up with autocomplete as you're typing. And then when you merge it, those tags get replaced with real values at runtime, usually from data or from some context. So that already was part of the initial release, but what we found is a few customers were wanting to kind of dynamically substitute those tags, maybe based on some other context. So not just replacing, first name with the first name from the record, but maybe evaluating something kind of like a rule in the document or something. This was possible before, but you had to make a kind of a calculation on the data model, which is needed just for the document. So that's not very good for encapsulation. This way you can have like real document rules embedded right in the document and handled in the code that manages the document events. And the next feature we want to show is very similar to the previous. Again, we already had repeat tags. These are like an open and close tag. And inside that is the repeat block where the content will be repeated for every record that's in the tag. So it's typically used for relations where you have a master and a detail, and you want to show all the detail records and repeat over them, repeat the body. So that was already, again, in the initial release. What we add in this release is a callback so that dynamically, as that tag is being processed, you get to decide if it shows or if it hides. And the use cases for this are really, again, mostly around security, like whether or not that whole block should be shown. So it's kind of like the if block, but it works on the whole repeat. And it could be from preferences or configurations, again, something like that. So that's it. That's what we're going to go through. I'm going to show you how to set those up and what they look like in the component. All right. So let's switch over first to my browser. Here I have a sample document. This is a document sample that we're now shipping in the SmartDoc editor repository. To be honest with you, I made a few tweaks to this yesterday, and so we're going to rebuild that and make a new distribution of this tomorrow. So if you rush out right after this webinar and you're really excited, I'm going to tell you to maybe wait until tomorrow and we get everything with a small update so that it's really working nicely. But essentially, this is the document. You can see that it's based on some sample data. I have the customer master here, and then the customer's employees in the repeat here, and some tags that will be merged. So real quick, before I get into the three features, the one thing I wanted to show is really how to get started. And so again, this is the example solution. And typically you will add libraries from the, well, if I go to makes sense to look at the body of this form. So this is the form, this is the component on the form. If you wanted to add this component, you would come into the package manager, and under components, you would see this one right here, the Smart Document Editor. And that allows you to put it onto a form, drag it onto a form. Now, there's really two things going on here. There's the component itself, but there's also a utility. So if you come over to modules, you see there's the SmartDoc Editor utils. The component itself is really just the in-app editing feature, but then there's all the utilities around how tags are merged and processed and all of that, building custom tag libraries, et cetera. So it's really a combination of those two that you really want to install both. Once you have that installed, you can pretty much just drag the component on the form seen here, and you can start to immediately run it in the client, and your users can type in it. So what we're going to show now is the first sample, which is the if tags. And I'll show you what that looks like in the client first. So what I've done here, let me just hide some things here that will pop up. What I've done here is I put the if tags here. I'll sort of delete these and start over so you can see it. But we have this info box at the top. Suppose that I wanted to show or hide this depending on something. Again, this is for static content. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put the if show info box tag. This is a custom tag that I made, and the end if, which closes that. So everything between these two tags is now conditional, and it's going to depend on the callback that I have set up, and it's going to decide whether or not this gets shown dynamically. What I'm going to use to evaluate here is just something simple. It could be a configuration or a tenant preference or user preference or something like that. Who knows? But I have a little toggle over here, just a variable in my solution, show info box. So to start with, it's going to render. So if I switch to preview mode here, so there's the info box, and you can see that there's all the rest of the report or the document. I'm going to switch back out of here, and I'm going to toggle off show info box. So now this simulates that the configuration or tenant preference or user preference would be different. And so when it merges those tags, you can see that the info box is now hidden, right? So the if processed. So let's take a look at how that was done in Developer. Going into the code that is behind this form. So I have my document editor form and the document editor JS. I made a little form variable here called show info box. That's the checkbox that you see. So that's simulating the sort of state or the context that we're going to evaluate. The next thing worth pointing out is, well, there's these tag fields, but again, that's a bit of review. These are all the database fields that I want to have tags for. We'll come back to that in a minute. When we do the mention override. This is what's new. I made these if tags here, and there's really only one. It's that show info box tag. So this is up to you, the developer, to decide what if tags are going to be available in your document when the user's typing, right? So it could be, some settings. You could have a bunch of these. It's up to you. It's just an array of objects with a display value, what you see when you're typing, and then a real value, what gets passed programmatically. So that's what we're going to evaluate farther down. So that's just, I set those up in a variable here. The next thing is when the editor gets set up, when the form first loads. And again, there's a lot of code here related to the sample that I'm not going to get into about how to put the database fields in there and whether or not you're using international or localized text, et cetera. Because that's all supported. But farther down, this section here is what's new, where we pass in or build the if tags. So pretty much you get this tag builder object from the utils module that you install. and it's a simple builder, and you can call add if tag, and you just pass in the real value and the display value. So it's pretty much, I'm just iterating over that variable I set up, and I call add if tag, and I pass in the real value, the display value. So now that's how I get the tags into the document. But what happens when the document is actually processed and merged with real data? So that happens when we tell it to, and that would be farther down in when we call the merge field or merge routine. So probably easiest if I look at this in outline view, and we have this method merge tags. So again, when I click that button that says show preview, eventually it's going to call to merge the tags. And this is the editor instance. This is part of that whole utility that we generate. I'll quickly show you where that's made. Farther down here, it's just at the beginning when we're setting up the editor, we just call get instance and pass in the component instance. Again, this is a bit of review, so I'm just going to go over that part quickly. Back to when the if tag gets merged, or the whole document gets merged, there is some extra parameters now in the latest version. You can pass in that your if parser or your if callback method. So this is a function that I'm passing in that gets called for every instance of an if tag. So let's take a look at what's in that. So here's my function, the if parser. Again, this is just being called as the document's being parsed. It passes back the tag that it's working on, the real value of that tag, and then the record object that could be in context, because this if tag could be at the main body of the document or inside a repeat. So there's a bit of context where it is in the document. As part of the sample, we're just printing out all the events to the console, so that you can ignore that. That's just for example. But then I evaluate, okay, well, which tag is it processing? I only have one, which is that example tag, right? And you're just going to return a Boolean value. So I'm basically saying, well, and if it's true, then the content inside the block remains in the document. If it's false, then the content is hidden. So if that show info box checkbox is enabled, it's going to return true and leave it up. Otherwise, it's going to return false and it's going to hide it. So that's pretty much end-to-end how that part works. You got to inject the tag into your document. When you call the merge on the document instance, you pass in the callback for your if parser. As it's being merged, it will call this for every instance of the if tags that you have. If this was inside a repeat, this would be called many times for the same tag type. So I'll move on from that example. That's the if parser. Again, if you have questions about that, about anything I'm showing, please put it in the Q&A and we can pick it up along the way. I'm going to switch back to my running client and back to the document editor mode. So now that we're done with the if tag, let's go on to the next feature that is new, which is any of these mention tags here can have a callback as well. So it used to be that it would just dynamically replace the value. So first name becomes first name, last name, etc. But now you have the option to kind of interject in that process and run some logic. So for this, let's suppose that we have some rule that, well, let's look at the preview mode again. Suppose there's some security setting or something where you can't see some information on someone who's younger than 18 years old, just an arbitrary rule here. So if you look at the employees in this list here, and you have some birth dates here, pretty much anything that's after 2000, late 2003, 2004, should be basically we want to hide their birthday. Just some random rule, right? So I'm going to switch back to the document editor. Again, this is my simulated context here. I'm hide date of birth. And now I'm going to switch back to preview mode. So when those tags are merged, you can see that the date of birth is now kind of redacted from the document, so you can't see it. This could actually be substituted with any value. I just put null so that it's hidden. But again, this is happening on the mention tags that are being processed. So let's go ahead and look at how that works. This is the date of birth on the employee table and when that tag is being merged. So again, we go back to the merge tags method. This is what gets called when that button is pushed to show the preview and it's merged with data. And again, we're passing in the record, some inline CSS if we have some, but it's really these last three arguments that are, that are new. And so the next one here is this mention overwrite. Again, this is a callback, so this is really a function that I've declared. And then in the callback for that, it's going to pass back in the data provider name, the relation name, the record, the value that is being like the substituted value that is already substituted, and then some information about the tag itself. So when the document is merging, that particular tag was in, well, we have a number of tags which are in the repeat body there. So this gets called a lot. And what I'm quickly evaluating here is, well, two things. So I have to, worth mentioning, if you look at the document, sorry, to go on a little tangent here, I also have this current time, which just shows the time that this was, oh, it's printed. I guess it's just showing the current date. It's right here, not the time. So April 14th is when that document was generated. That's not coming from the data model. So that's kind of also handled dynamically. So it's really two things going on there. If the tag was called custom now, one of those custom tags that I injected, then I just return the new date. If the tag that's being evaluated is the employee date of birth, then what I'm going to do, excuse me, is evaluate the value which was passed in, which is that actual date object, and I determine the age of the employee. And if they are, my hide date of birth flag is on, so this is the simulated security context or tenant preference or something, right? If that's turned on, and the age is less than 18, or I should say, if it's not on or the age is greater than 18, we just return the value as is. If those conditions are true, then we return null, which is how we're hiding that age. So it's pretty similar to the if parser. The only difference is the if parser, you return a Boolean because it's either the content is rendered or it's not. Here, you can actually return a value to overwrite what is already being written in the document when that tag is merged. If it's quite common, maybe that you don't even want to overwrite the value. So if I'm only interested in these two tags, all the other tags that are in that document, the first name, the last name, all this other stuff here, it's getting called for those, but I'm only interested in these two. In that case, the default is just to return the value.
Sean, we have received a question about this. If the tags work on repeaters as well, but I think this is a prime example of that, right?
Yes, yeah.
If the if tags work on a repeater.
Yeah, the if tags, was it about the if tags or the mention tags?
The if tags.
Yeah, so but the use case for the if tags is a little bit different. That's more for static text, right? So and the difference is whether or not it's just a Boolean, if it renders or not. The mention tags are really substituted values anyway, and it gives you a chance to sort of override that substitution and take something from the context of your application running and override what would be substituted. So like a little bit more control there. So that's the main difference between them. Both of them work inside the repeat body.
Okay, both of them work. So if you, for example, want to show an icon per row, which one would you use for that?
An icon per row.
Or some data per row. So in the repeater.
So if we look at the form here, this table here is inside this whole repeat block.
Mm-hmm.
Start repeat employee and repeat employee. So any tag that's in here plus any of the regular content gets repeated.
Mhm.
The difference is with the tags that the parser knows what record it's on. And again, this is a bit of a review from the previous webinar, but it's actually passing in, each individual employee record. So those get evaluated just based on the data itself, and that goes back to kind of the tags at the beginning. So I'm saying these are the fields that I want available in my document. The user doesn't have to know these. He or she can come in and just put the pound symbol, and then you get, employee, and then you see what the employee fields are. So those get injected into the document, but then there's also some metadata about those tags. So what the field is in the database, right? There's that date of birth, and then if there's a relation, customer to employee, this is a one-to-many, so it knows that when it repeats, it's going to have multiple records. There's a formatter for it, et cetera. So there's some metadata about each tag, including that it's in the context of a certain, relation or parent-child relationship. So that's how that gets substituted automatically. The only thing I'm showing is that you can override the substitution here. Anything in a repeat tag gets repeated. So any static content, like if I just want to put in, some static content here and reprocess that document, now you see it's repeated there next to the substituted value.
I got a great follow-up question on this. What should you do if you want the entire row or the entire line to be removed?
Then you can't really, I don't think in the in the repeat itself, hide the entire row. You may want to do that on the data level, right? Because this is just iterating over a related set of records. So if you were to omit a record, you could call omit record on the found set object itself, or in the query that loads, or the filter that's applied to that found set. That would be the ideal place to hide that data.
Okay, so just filter your found set or your initial data properly.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, clear.
Yeah.
Last question we've got: can the repeaters be nested? Not really
Yes.
related to the if tags, but
yes, repeaters can be nested. So it could be that I want to look at customers' orders, and inside those orders are line items, something like that. So you can do nested repeats. And again, it just depends on how you set up those tags when you pass them into the tag builder.
all right.
Yeah. I would advise just sort of like, if you really want to get into a complicated setup, like a report with summaries and things like that, then you really want to get into a reporting engine and not it's more of a report than a document. So you get kind of a blurry line between a complicated like listing document and a real report.
Okay, that's clear. That's all questions for now. If there's
Cool.
any more, please just keep sending them in.
Yeah, this is just a pure tech demo, so I'm happy to take all questions here. So I hope that's clear on the mention overwrite tag. I would say that's probably one of the most useful features we have on display today. There's one other feature that I'd like to show, and that would be the repeat overwrite callback. So the use case for this is that, suppose that for this whole document, some security or something, we want to just omit the repeat. Essentially, it could be a security thing like that set of records is not available for this user or something. So basically, it will skip that repeat, anything inside that block. So I'll turn that on, and I'll switch back to preview. And now you can see our very lovely tiny document with no data in it, because I skipped that repeat. So we had that request. I think some customers wanted to, for security reasons, I think it was, turning those found sets on, or those data lists on and off. So that can be done. And I'll show quickly how that's done. It's basically the same as the if tag, so it should be pretty easy to explain. Again, the repeat tags themselves are available based on relations. So for every distinct relation that's in the list of tags here, you will be able to do a repeat. So that's how that, if you look at the document here, and, to start that repeat, you do the dollar symbol and then you get your repeaters. I only have one repeater because it's that employee one. So that's how that gets generated. So when we pass those tags into the tag builder, that's how they get in the document. Now, when the document gets processed, again, we go to this merge tags method. This is what gets called when you click that button. And the final argument there is the repeat overwrite. Again, that's a function. This function is being called for every repeat tag in the document. It's going to pass in the relation, the name of the data set really that's being repeated over, the real value, essentially the programmatic name of the tag, not the displayed one that's on the, you saw that it's called employees on the document, but the real value is customer to employee, or it's the same as the relation in this case. And then the record, the parent record in that context. So that would be the customer in this case. So essentially that gets called one time in this document because there's only one repeat tag. And again, this is where you can return a Boolean, true to leave everything inside of that repeat tag rendered, false to hide it. And again, I have that just sort of fabricated scenario where I have a checkbox, and if the employee repeat is not hidden, it will be true. Otherwise, it'll be false and it won't render. So that's pretty much how you do it. Yeah, and again, that's just a real quick product update on the SmartDoc editor. But the reason we wanted to do this as part of the Titanium release and the big flagship release for this year is I think this is one of those components, a lot like the NG grids, where they're pretty powerful, pretty flexible, a little bit complicated because they could do so much. And I think the community needs to be exposed to this kind of over and over to let it sink in, figure out, is that right for me? Where can I use this in my application? Because I think this has a lot of use cases in almost every business application. So I would encourage you guys to try the sample. Again, we're going to rebuild the sample and post it on Friday. So we just wait till tomorrow to get the sample. I had hoped that it would be ready for you to download and try after this webinar, but we need to make a rebuild for a few fixes. And then everything that you see here will be in the sample, and you get this with the repository. So with that, Victor, I'm going to leave up, we never ran the poll, did we, Victor?
No, that was the next thing I was going to ask.
Yeah. So
we have no more technical questions, but maybe it's time for us to ask questions to the attendees then.
Yeah, so I'm going to launch a little poll here. It has a couple questions. If you were in yesterday's webinar, it's two of the questions are a repeat anyway. So if you've already answered, no worries about it. But if you're doing this webinar, please let us know about these two questions. And in the meantime, I'm going to put up some useful links here. Of course, run out and download the latest version of Servoy that's now out. And related to this webinar, the SmartDoc editor component can be added through the package manager as usual. But for documentation on the utils module, I didn't show that, but I had it up here. Forgot that one. For documentation on the utils module, come to that link that we can put in the chat for everyone as well. Let me do that real quick. And so that has some of the getting started in wiki documentation for the utility module. And we're going to update the sample that ships with the component and make sure this is all in sync tomorrow. And I'm going to leave these other links up here. I would encourage everyone, if you have questions about it, go to our forum. If you're running the component and you have issues or you think you found a bug, please go to support.servoy.com. We're really eager to get input from people using this component because I think there's a lot you can do with it still. The underlying library is really powerful, and we're really just exposing part of that today. In the future, there could be a lot more features, sort of like what we did with these new features, but it really depends on you guys. So I would encourage you to go in and experiment and get your hands dirty and, struggle through some parts and give us feedback and give us questions throughout that.
All right. Then I think if everyone has answered the poll or our survey, written down the links, make sure you have the link from the webinar from yesterday as well if you did not attend. Then I think I would like to thank everyone for attending. I hope to see everyone in the next webinar. Probably we won't do another 2 in a week the next time, but
No, if you want more demos, you have to come to Servoy World. I'm not doing
there
another
you go.
webinar between now and Servoy World.
That's another plug for Servoy World.
Yeah.
Make sure you attend.
It's cheap. It's near you. Your entry fee goes entirely to a Ukrainian charity, and yeah, we're going to just be doing tech stuff all day.
All right. Well, you sold me already. I'm coming.
All right. See you there.
Then thanks everyone for coming, and I hope to see everyone in the next one.